I was out running on the trails nearby yesterday, and I just have to pause for a minute as I tell it because I was filled with so much light and so much joy because, well, for one, selfishly, a little bit egoically, I've I've been talking about this moving out of this space that is winter into springtime. And in a way, it's silly to talk about it, but it's such a big deal to me. This space that's like, I just want to be outside in enjoyable weather and not be in this space that's more of a battle to get myself outside because it's cold and windy and just icky and it's gray and not pleasant. Yesterday I step outside on the trails. My heart was just exploding because it was so beautiful out. The temperatures were perfect. I I talk a lot about, the forest around here, and a lot of it's gone. But there are some places where those older ponderosas still exist. So I got to go run through this beautiful ponderosa forest. Then I, broke past the line where, into the burn scar that's 10, 20 years old at this point, depending on which fire. I think this one's 20 years old. So I break out past the trees, and oftentimes this space is really hard to walk into. But this day, I continued to be filled up, and I continued to be filled up because this burn scar was so green. Not green in a way that, the forests like the ponderosas or even aspens are coming back, but I could really just be in the space that was, being so grateful that the land was sprouting again. The land is coming to life in this green expression. So there's this canyon that I dropped into, and down at the bottom of the canyon is this flowing water, and I get to spend this moment, these moments that I don't get all the time here living in the Southwest, in this land that seems to be a forest turning into a desert. I don't get a whole lot of time to wander across the streams and be in this just green area. And that's really what I wanted to bring you today. If you watched the last video I recorded, we got a little dark, which I tend to do because I think it's important to hang out in those dark places. The places, where we bring up some of those hard realities that, our tendency is to push them away. Sometimes it's really, really the best thing that we can do to spend time in those dark places. For example, in this canyon, and this burn scar, is these, it's trying to find words other than the word I tend to call them, but I'll call them, the way I interact with them is what they are, is they're skeletons. They're skeletons of ponderosas that burned 10, 20 years ago, again, depending on the fire, and remain standing. Occasionally one will fall over, but this phenomenon, when you come to this land that is walking on this land and these ponderosa skeletons that remain, and oftentimes it's the practice, because it's simply what the experience unfolds as, is a barren, dry land where these skeletons really steal the show. And oftentimes that's a incredibly difficult space to be in. But shifting to today's story, dropping down into this canyon, and again, these skeletons, they're still present. And also is this new life that's arising in a form that's very different. It's a form that's not the forest growing back. That's been plain to see here, is that the ponderosa forest is not coming back unless us humans decide to plant the trees and put in the effort to regrow it. What is coming back is a new form of life. So I've been hanging out in these spaces. And I filmed this video a couple weeks ago about a trip to California. I'll link it down below, of course, if you haven't watched it yet. It's this video where I really brought in the theme of hope. It's this space that's been stirring inside me, and it's new. It's new because as I've spent the last several years walking this land, I haven't had a lot of it. I haven't had a lot of it because, well, like this time last year, we had terrible, terrible fires burning. And all I could think was that we're headed in the wrong direction. Like, things are bad, but we're headed in a direction where things just get worse. And that's a tough place to be in. What I found fascinating is that there's a space that I'm experiencing as even tougher to be in, because if the world is going in a direction that's downward, that's this continued darkening, that's the continued burning of our forests, that's the continued perpetuation of whatever dark thing is alive in your world, it's almost an easy place to be in. It's painful. It's horribly painful. And at the same time, it's almost easy to hang out there. We get familiar with hanging out in these spaces. And if there's nothing we can do, then, well, all we can do is sit back and hang out and experience the downfall. This year, everything's different, because this year, the theme isn't more fire. The theme has been water. Bringing back this California trip, right? California, for most of my lifetime, has been a space of drought. In all my memories going to California, the hillsides were all dried up, hardly hanging on. So when I show up in California this year and everything is so incredibly green, And when I go walk out in my backyard forest and there's water flowing and everything is green, it stirs something inside me and makes me think that maybe there's a path forward that doesn't have to involve the continued mass loss of forest. I told you we'd bring in more light today, but with everything I do, I owe it to our world to keep us grounded in reality. And as we do that, we want to be taken off into the light. We want these stories to be, okay, we're out of the dark and shooting off into the light to live happily ever after and have our problems solved. And reality, right? Reality, grounding in reality is a both. Can we live life being aware of the darkness, being aware of these tough, heavy things that weigh on us and pull us down and certainly don't make us feel good, make us feel terrible at other times? And can we allow in that light? Can we ground into reality, what is alive right here and right now, as we hold on to hope, as we hold on to this knowing that there are paths forward out of this darkness? Not to take us too far back down in that direction. I know we went deeper into it in the last video, but the reality is that there are so many dark experiences playing out in our worlds. And there are paths forward out of them. But those paths only get to unfold if we can hold these many different qualities that are alive in our world all at once. The fire and the water, to bring in these element themes. Destruction and hope. Can we get into the practice that isn't being in these repetitive patterns of always going to one space or another? I'm going to either be in the darkness or I'm either going to be in the light. Can we hold space for both and learn to show up in life in a way that our attention is really going to the places, whether they're darker, whether they're lighter, living in this dance, weaving between the two along the full length of these spectrums, really putting our attention in the spaces that are asking for our attention as each moment unfolds. So just that today. We're getting into some deeper, trickier stuff. And as always, I am here to support you through it all. I have these different spaces for you to dive deeper into practice, to really cultivate these skills that are staying grounded, being connected, right? Staying grounded in our own safety and stability and the reality that's right here, and being connected into what is fully alive in each experience, whether that's our own embodied experience, whether that's something out in the world that's lighting something up in us. So many more great things to talk about. As always, thank you so much for listening here today. If you haven't yet, please leave a like, hit subscribe here on YouTube. Head over to upwardslopes.com/newsletter, subscribe to the newsletter over there, and let's continue to grow this space where we can really learn to more fully show up for what's present, for what's asking to be known, to be understood at this very important point in time. Yes. Thanks for tuning in today, and I will catch you in whatever the next space is that we find ourselves in.